Hey, everybody. It is Thursday. It is MFSN. So we are going to be talking fantasy sports strategy. And as you know, opening day of baseball is 1 week away. So my best friend here and one of the best experts in the business is here to help me along. Say hi to everybody, Ross.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ross the Boss, and I'm going to talk baseball fantasy strategy with you, Cowboy. As you said, yes, we have a week until the regular season, and players are dropping like flies. I mean, they're falling. Why don't you update the group and tell us what happened today?
Well, today there were two big names today. The biggest one is Rhys Hoskins fielding a ball in a spring training game, went down with a knee injury, a non-contact knee injury. Paramedics had to come out. He was carted off the field. Doesn't look very good. So if you haven't drafted yet and you have Hoskins on your board, I would drop him down to the bottom of that first base ranking, because until we hear otherwise, you should assume that his season is likely over. The other one is the closer for Atlanta, Raisel Iglesias, who was a kind of a sleeper kind of player at closer, who could be one of those ones who would compete for top closer, but he back stiffness or back issue.
No, inflammation. I read it. Inflammation of the shoulder
inflammation. Okay, they're saying
it's light though. He'll start the season in the IL, but I don't see him staying that long. I don't think it's that serious.
But AJ Minter is a really good backup there as the closer in Atlanta, and if he gets the first 2 weeks and is dominant, does he keep the job? How does that affect where you rank Iglesias in the closer ranking?
I still think Iglesias will be the closer. I have full faith in him. I want to get shares in Iglesias in some of my leagues I'm not drafted in. I feel he's going to have at least between 30 and 35 saves. Minter will be the setup guy, but Iglesias is if you read about it, it's not a major injury, and he'll probably be like the first week on the IL, and he'll be back. Don't freak out about him. Still draft him.
All right. So those are the two big injuries of the day. Obviously, that goes of the day. That goes along with Edwin Diaz. That goes along with Jose Altuve. So
Gavin Lux, and I mean, there's a whole.
Gavin Lux was the original. He was like the OG injury, I guess, because he was like the first week of spring training. Now, chances are, if you're in more than one baseball fantasy league this year, you're drafting this weekend. So the new season starts in a week. So we are going to spend the next 30 minutes or so going over all the important things to remember, highlighting some of the things we've done in shows past. We've gone over the different positions. We've gone over some basic strategy ideas. We'd love to hear any questions you have if you have a draft coming. So please leave it in the comments. We'll put it up. We'll give you our best advice and hopefully help you dominate your own draft. But that's what we're going to talk about. So, Ross, you are famous for best player available strategy. Why don't you explain a little bit what you mean by that?
In the first two rounds, I don't take a pitcher. I'll just be upfront. I will not take a pitcher. I'll take a hitter the first two rounds. And that hitter, we talked about the tiers. We talked about who you should draft in the first two rounds by tiers. But, as we mentioned, second base and third base are the most shallow positions this year in fantasy baseball. Outfield there's a lot of great outfielders, but you want to take the best player available in the first two rounds. I always take hitters. I know people get nervous. Oh, I'm not going to get a top tier pitcher. You don't need a top tier two to win the league. You need two top tier hitters to win the league. And I don't take a closer early. Don't do something stupid like that. Don't freak out when the first moron takes a closer. Doesn't mean you have to take one. Relax on that. I mean, trust me. There's a lot of closers out there, and even there's a lot of guys that are sharing the closing role. And we talked about that earlier in the week when we talked about relief pitchers. So all that being said, your first two rounds, if I had the first pick in the draft, I take Aaron Judge just because he's younger. He's 31 or he's 30. He'll be 31.
Yeah.
And he had the monster season last year. I don't think he'll have the same season, but he hits steals bases, hits for average, RBIs, home runs, plays in Yankee Stadium, has a good lineup in front of him. Blah, 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 blah. But Aaron Judge is my number one. I know people like Ramirez for Cleveland. I love this kid Rodriguez for Seattle. People like Trey Turner. He had an unbelievable WBC tournament.
That didn't hurt his stock value, did it?
And Ohtani, I mean, in all seriousness, I mean, if I got the first pick, I would probably take Ohtani too. I mean, I would love to get shares of Ohtani. He's going to be a
Yeah,
monster year.
especially if you're in one of those leagues where you don't need to have two Otanis, right? Where you can play him either at pitcher, where
Oh, they
one
have
player
that.
you can play him.
You
There
can
are
do
some
that in
leagues where
leagues now.
he's both. Um, you mentioned it in the beginning here, and I want to highlight it because I think it's important. When you talk about a position being thin, the depth of that position, what do you mean by that?
I mean, like, okay, third base. We got Riley. You got you got Ramirez. You got Riley, right, for Atlanta, and then you got Nolan over in St. Louis, and then after that, it's kind of a drop. You know what I mean? I mean, there's not many great third basemen after the top tier. That's why if you get one of the top tier guys, you have a huge advantage. Same at second base with Altuve going out, and he's out for the first 8 to 12 weeks of the season. That's a lot.
Yeah.
So second base is pretty thin too. I mean, you got Simeon, you got there's like 2 or 3 great second basemen. I think Mookie Betts counts as second base still.
In some leagues. Yeah. You got Ozzie Albies can be,
so just being shallow. I mean, do you want Chapman for Toronto as your third baseman? Do you want Jonathan India? I mean, I like these. Trust me, I like these players. I'm not saying but I'm saying if you don't go after the top tier guys in the 12-man league, let's say 12-man league, not 10, 12, not 8. We're saying 12. You're going to be. I don't want to say you're stuck, but you'll have a Jonathan India at second base. You'll have.
So what? One of the things that's important to note is we always talk about these different strategies, and Ross believes in the best player available
in the first 2 rounds.
In the first few rounds, we'll say few because one thing that's important to remember is it's never that cut and dry. So let's say Ross maybe it's the second round, and the best player available, there is a stud first baseman who might be a little better than the stud third baseman who's available. But he knows if he doesn't take a third baseman there, he's not going to get one. So maybe he doesn't take Vladimir Guerrero and he takes Nolan Arenado or Manny Machado because he knows when he picks again, he won't be able to replace any production at third base. But there's first baseman 10, 12, 13 players deep in that position where there's still a good chance he's going to get quality. So remember, when we talk about strategy, when we talk about these tips and tools, it's never all or nothing, right? It's never that simple. And so that's why I wanted to highlight thin categories versus thin.
Yeah. I mean, first base, I know Dr. Dan Ratner said it's not that deep, but it's deep. I don't care what he says. First base, you could get Nathaniel Lowe in the late in the draft, and his numbers, he'll have 30 home runs and 100 RBIs. I mean, so you have Christian Walker, you have guys that play first base that are going to hit 30 home runs. They're going to have 100 RBIs. You can draft between the 10th and 12th round because there's so many great hitting. I mean, if I can have CJ Cron as my starting first baseman, I'll be happy. I mean, there's not a big drop off from CJ Cron to, let's say, Matt Olson. It really isn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I like Matt Olson just because he plays in Atlanta and their lineup is potent. But again, the first base, you don't have to, unless you get, like you said, Vladimir Guerrero or somebody in that upper tier, Goldschmidt, somebody like that, then I understand why you take those guys early. But I'd rather go after the position that's shallow, as we discussed. If I can get a Simeon, if I can get a Manny Maldonado, if I can get some of these guys that positions are not that deep, it's a huge advantage against the rest.
Yeah.
And I mean, catcher also. I mean, where do you take a catcher? Do you take Sal Perez early? Do you take Will Smith early? Do you take JT early? I mean, I don't know. I mean, again, 11% last year of your fantasy total came from the catching position. Okay, so just remember that you don't need to draft a top tier catcher to win your league.
Yeah.
No. And a lot of people go after catchers early, which I think is a waste. There's a lot of good this year. I think there's a lot of good hitting catchers. I mean, there's if you're in a 12-man league and it's one catcher in each team, you can kind of wait. I know in one of our leagues we done together. I have 2 catchers just to make you guys work. But I mean, there's 12 catchers that you can draft that won't hurt your team.
All right, I'm gonna quick quiz here. I want you to answer this. It's gonna. I'm using it because it's gonna highlight your point here. Player A versus player B, and you're gonna tell me, and then you'll guess who the players are. I'm gonna name 2 first basemen.
Yes.
Player A,
Okay.
he hit 240, 34 home runs, 103 RBIs, 86 runs scored. So 34, 103, 86. Player B hit 242, so only 2 points higher. 36 home runs, that's 2 more. 94 RBIs, that's 9 less. And 84 runs scored, that's 2 less. So player A, 240, 34, 103, 86. Player B, 242, 36, 94, 84. Who would you?
The first one I will have to say, I'm going to say it's CJ Crone.
Okay.
And I say B is Nathaniel Lowe.
No, and they're wrong. They're both good guesses, and I bet their numbers were close. But I'm highlighting
Christian Walker didn't hit 240. So
player A, 240, 34 home runs, 103 RBIs, 86 runs scored was Matt Olson. Okay. Player B, 242, 36 home runs, 94 RBIs, 84 runs scored. So more home runs, same batting average, and just a few was Christian Walker. And guess what? You can get them like 7 rounds apart. I think
7 rounds apart. And
the
only reason there's a difference, as I told you, it's because the teams they play on.
I mean, the name value. Matt Olson's name has value, right? And so that's an important thing to remember. Way back in the day, when Frank Thomas was kind of the big hurt, early, like it was mostly in the 90s, but even in the early 2000s, then came along Travis Hafner. Remember Travis Hafner with Cleveland?
Sure.
And there was a year where Travis Hafner was routinely picked in the top 3 or 4 rounds, and Frank Thomas would go probably in the 9th or 10th round, but his numbers were the same. But because he was seen as an older player on the decline, you could get really good value. It's important to remember that, like, if a position is deep, it's deep for a reason. And Christian Walker, you brought him up as a perfect example. Here's a guy who's probably not going to make anybody's top 10 list of first basemen, but I just gave you his numbers, and they're almost identical to the guy who's ranked 4th or 5th on everybody's list.
Yeah, and those numbers, you can read off Nathaniel Lowe's numbers, you can read off CJ Crone's numbers.
Yeah.
You can read off even Anthony Rizzo of the Yankees, who's dropping on his
my problem with him is injury, right? He's going to miss
okay,
a month
fine.
with
I'm
a
just
back
saying
injury.
He plays in a great team. You're a Yankee fan.
If he's a daily league and you have an adequate, he's a great second first baseman to have on your roster, a corner infielder for that reason.
But again, so that's what when you're doing your strategy, you got to realize you kind of want to wait on first base. You kind of want to wait. And shortstop, there's top tier shortstops, but if you can get a top tier shortstop early, that's a huge find. And then you got to worry about the people like that aren't getting, like Adam Duvall of the Red Sox. I mean, his numbers 2 years ago for home runs.
Yeah, he's a power guy.
He's a power. He's going to hurt you in batting average. I'll tell you right now. He's not an average guy.
He's never going to run.
But he's somebody you can get in the 14th or 15th round. And those are the type of players that are going to win you the league. It's not the players that you and I rant and rave how great they are, like Rodriguez. I mean, all these guys are great. Everybody knows how great they are, but you gotta get the guys who are on their way, who's going to be there late in the draft. And you even said like the rookies, like Carroll. I mean, Gunnar. Yeah. And you even mentioned today. You mentioned Jordan for
Jordan
St. Louis.
Yeah,
Jordan Walker. And I mean, all these guys. People are going to take these guys earlier than they should because it's all about hype and getting these guys on your team. And you look like a genius if you draft these guys early because, they could be the next big thing. You don't know.
But in baseball, they don't hit as often as they miss. That's an important thing to remember.
Yeah.
For every, Julio Rodriguez who or Fernando Tatis, these guys who hit the ground running, You have like Brian Taylor, who was going to, for the Yankees back in the 90s, was going to be the next Dwight Gooden, hurts his shoulder in a bar fight and never pitches in the majors. Mike Trout struggled out of the gate, right? People don't hit the ground running. So don't get carried away by the helium. I call them helium players. These players who are rising up the draft board because they're rookies who are having great springs. Jordan Walker's hurt, but I guarantee you he's going to go in the first 6 or 7 rounds of almost any draft this year. And I think that's too high for him.
I mean, again, having a 20-year-old who's, how tall is he, Casey? 6'8"? I mean,
yeah, he's huge.
I mean, he's a huge kid. He's athletically, he's off the charts, for a baseball player. And I mean, if again, the first year of anybody, it's always getting adjusted. It's a tough situation for any baseball player the first year playing in Major League Baseball.
Yeah,
especially a 20-year-old, unless you're Ken Griffey Jr. I get it. I understand Ken Griffey Jr.'s the exception. He should be.
He's the original natural.
He's the kid. He's
yeah.
the kid, and he deserves to have that title. And I get it. But again, as I mentioned, there's a lot of good rookie pitchers coming out. There's Grayson Rodriguez of Baltimore, who I'm ranting and raving about. I saw him pitch last week. He looks great. Big guy, throws heat. I think he's the rookie of the year. So pitcher wise, there's a lot of pitchers that you can get in the middle of the round, like Robbie Ray. There's a lot of guys that don't get any press at all that you can pick up, and don't think you have to get like a top tier pitcher to win your league, which you don't. And I mean, Verlander, yeah, I like him. He's 40 years old. Yeah. Do I want to take him in the first couple rounds? I don't. And I don't suggest you do. And, again, you want bats. You want people who can steal bases. Usually, I'm just saying for a 10 category league, the stolen base category is very important. So you want those guys that do everything. And they're out there.
It's easy to find power anywhere on the draft board.
I agree.
In the early rounds, you can find somebody who's hitting 35 to 40 bombs. In the 8th round, you can find somebody who's hitting 30 to 35 bombs. In the 10th round, you can find somebody who's hitting 30 to 35 bombs. So you want those guys early who have a high floor in all the categories, right? Who are going to give you above average in every category. Then later on, let's say you don't get a lot of power early on. You get the Trey Turners, you get the, those guys who are going to hit you 20 home runs and steal you 30 bags, but score a lot of runs. You can get a Rowdy Tellez to play first base for you. He's going to hit 35 homes. You can get an Adam Duvall in the outfield who's going to hit 30 home runs for you. You can find that late.
You can. And, watching the WBC, were there players that really are going to go up in the draft because of it? I would say Trey Turner, if he's a lot of leagues, I know he's going 1, but I mean, that just shows you what a great hitter this guy is, and he steals bases. So Trey Turner, if it's not Judge, I would probably take Turner 2 or 3. Casey, what do you think?
I would probably take, I think the top kind of 3 guys or 4 guys at this point are Aaron Judge, Jose Ramirez, Ronald Acuna, and Trey Turner. You can throw Julio Rodriguez in there, I think, at 5 because of the potential there. If you believe Fernando Tatis Jr. is coming back and going to be the Tatis Jr. of 2019, he is a steal at 7, 6 or 7.
I would take Ronald out because last year power numbers weren't that impressive, and I would put Ohtani in there.
My fear with Ohtani is,
tell me,
he's utility only. I understand it's not a huge deal, but
I understand. I just feel it's just a phenom, and you just want to jump on the bandwagon. And people are saying he's the greatest baseball player ever, and I'm saying, well, there's a guy named Babe Ruth that pitched and hit, and
but he's kind of the closest thing.
100%. 100%. I mean,
what do you think of? He didn't do anything to dismiss the hype. Madasaka Yoshida, the outfielder who signed.
I think he was, his ADP was very low. Casey Scheifele.
I think it's skyrocketed.
And this guy was hitting line drive shots on down the line. He was making catches. He was stealing base. This guy's stock skyrocketed.
Yeah, I would.
And
I would be
I think
looking
he
to
can
get
make
him
the
in-
Red Sox a contender. How about that, Casey
Well, they
Scheinfeld?
say he's going to hit cleanup. I mean, they're talking about him as a cleanup
I'm
hitter.
on his bandwagon, and I'm so happy. I like Japanese ball players. I just like them. I just think they're disciplined. I think they're team players, and I just like how they show up to play.
Yeah.
And this guy fits the mold, and I love this guy now. I'm all over this guy. I really believe this guy's going to have a great year, and I think before that WBC, now I feel the Red Sox can contend. I really do with this guy.
Did you find it odd to see Lars Nootbaar, which is, by the way, one of the best names in Major League Baseball, Lars Nootbaar playing for the Japanese team?
Now he's his nationality.
His mom, I think, is Japanese.
Yeah, but I think where's he from? Like originally, like I forgot.
I'm not sure, but
I think his mom's Japanese, and they welcomed when he landed in Japan. They had he landed in the middle of the night, and there were people like waiting at the airport.
No, cheering for him. How cool is that?
Cheering for him, and he said, "This never happens to me in the States." And I played for St. Louis, which is a great baseball town.
Right, and he's a fourth outfielder.
And and this guy he made some great catches, and people in Japan love this guy. I mean, I thought it was weird, but again, a lot of the teams like Team Israel, even Venezuela, a lot of these teams have used players that have connections to the country, but they've never been there.
Yeah. You had Jock Peterson on Team Israel, I think, which
he was, and he's not going to play for Team USA, so it's nice he's on Team Israel. I get it.
Yeah, no, I don't have a problem with it, but
that WBC, I think it really helped baseball, and it was fun to watch, and I wish they could do it every year, but they can't. And if you think about it, the only time they can do it is in March. They can't do it after the season's over.
Do you think
they can't do it in an All-Star break?
And I know this is an inappropriate way to say it, but do you think Rob Manfred and MLB are happy that Rhys Hoskins got hurt today? Because everybody was saying after Altuve got hurt and Edwin Diaz got hurt, like you can't do the World Baseball Classic in preseason because it affects their clubs for the whole year. Well, now you have a player who's just getting hurt and ready.
Listen, injuries is part of the game. That's the only time you can do it. You can't do it anytime else. You can't do it in January. You can't do it after the season's over. Players don't want to report to a team and have the season extended after that. So I think March is the perfect month, and there's going to be injuries. I mean, it's part of the game. I wish, I feel bad that Diaz got hurt and Altuve, but I just think it brought so much like rooting for baseball again, and people were so into it. It's great to see. And I had friends that went to Arizona for the games, and they loved it.
Yeah, they said that the stadiums were louder than almost any baseball stadium they've been in. All right, so you've done a bunch of drafts now. You and I are both in multiple leagues, and we've done a bunch of drafts. Are there a few players who you find commonly ending up on your team, maybe middle to late rounds? Some players maybe that just fall to you because you believe in? Can you give the listener or the viewer maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned Adam Duvall, I feel, is going to have a good year. I think something that's going to benefit huge from the no shifting situation is Joey Gallo. I feel he has the power and he has RBIs. He just his batting average is low. I think now with the no shift, that's going to help his batting average. Joey Gallo is like another guy that if you can get him like in the last round, I think it's totally worth it. I feel people just run away from him because he strikes out a lot, which he does. I'm not going to say he doesn't, but he does hit home runs. I mean, he'll hit, if he plays every day in Minnesota, he's going to have 40 home runs if they let him play.
Yeah.
But we mentioned like the guys like Christian Walker. We mentioned who else? I mean, I'm thinking who else. I've been taking in a lot of my drafts. He's a pitcher, and he's healthy, and he's throwing great in spring training in Florida. Is Jack Flaherty? The guy from the St. Louis Cardinals that pitched with Max Fried in high school,
and Lucas Giolito.
But he's somebody that you can get late. I mean, a lot of leagues he's not even like taken. And the Cardinals already said this is our ace. They already said this is our guy that's going to be our number one. And then another late pick that you can take if you need a reliever. There's two guys, and again, I'm really an advocate on the relievers this year just because it's gonna be shared situation. It's Tyler. I hope I said this right. Tyler Rogers of San Francisco. He's going to share duties with.
They have Taylor Rogers and Tyler Rogers, right?
Get the one. I think it's Tyler, but just make sure it's the guy that gets saves. Yeah, you'll see the projected saves on there, and that's the guy you want. I get them. I'm not good. Tyler and Taylor, I'm horrible, and they're brothers. And so I like him, and I like Munoz of Seattle. Yeah. I feel he'll get like 25 to 30 saves, and Seawald will probably get 20 to 25 saves.
Yeah.
I love those two guys, late picks. You know, again, my favorite reliever, he'll go early, is Devin Williams of Milwaukee. I think he's hands down the best reliever this year, especially he showed his stuff in the WBC. He's fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, his changeup's great, and he's just good. I mean, he's just, with Diaz going down, he's the new number one reliever. And again, we talked about this. Iglesias of Atlanta, I know he's hurt, but he'll probably drop in some leagues. He's a good pickup too. He won't be hurt that long.
Yeah,
and Atlanta's going to win 100 games, so it's a good guy to pick up. But those are the people I'm looking at. I also love like the Christian Walkers. I love those type of guys. I wish I could say there's an Oakland A that I want to grab. I mean, we talked about that one kid who steals bases.
Esteury Ruiz.
He, again, in the minor leagues, he was great. Major leagues, I have no idea.
He didn't get a chance. The only advantage he has in Oakland is who else are they going to play, right? Like they don't have the depth where they're going to sit this guy because they have to put their superstar in center field. So the issue with him is he's I don't know if his power, I think he hit almost 20 home runs in the minors, but I don't think his power translates.
He stole 80 bases.
Yeah, but he's a one-trick pony. If he can get on base at a 360 clip or above, then I think he's rosterable on almost any team because he'll steal you 60 bags. But it's going to come down to, is he Billy Hamilton 2.0, right? Like this guy who can steal the world, but you can't steal first base. That was always the moniker of him.
And then I love this kid from Florida, Brian De La Cruz. I think he's going to have a huge breakout year. I'm all over him too. So there are all those guys that you can get late in the draft that I'm just attaching myself to because I feel they're going to have like these breakout years. I also like, what's his name? The guy for Detroit, Green.
Riley Green, yeah.
Riley, I love him too. I think he's going to have a big year.
Yeah, I mean, the post-hype sleepers are ones you take chances are later in the draft. Like Jared Kelenic has burned fantasy owners for 2 years, but he's having a good spring. We know this guy has the tools. You don't want to draft him early, but if he's available later in the rounds and it's a luxury pick for you, he's a guy who, if he figures it out, is a 5-tool. Is what Julio Rodriguez is what Kelenic was supposed to be. And if they have two of them on that same team, oh my gosh, right? Like those are the kind of Josh Jung, another guy who
third baseman for Texas,
right? Another post-type sleeper who was supposed to be everything and kind of fizzled. Mackenzie Gore is going to get all the leash he needs in Washington, maybe to figure it out. This guy was arguably the best reliever in the minors for years. Big, tall lefty who throws hard. So you look for those kinds of guys later in the draft.
How about your guy? I took because I just thought of you because you love this guy and he gets hurt every year. Hopefully he doesn't get hurt.
Mondesi or Buxton?
Byron Buxton.
They're talking about DHing him this year more to keep him healthy. I hope so because I own him in a keeper league. The guy's talent is undeniable. The problem is he's got the boxer's equivalent of a glass jaw, right? Like he trips over a blade of grass and he has to miss 2 weeks. It feels like.
I mean, his ADP is very low. I mean, he's going.
Oh yeah, I find myself taking him.
I mean, it's just that's somebody else I don't mind taking a chance on because the ceiling on him is so high.
Well, if you remember, like 10 years ago when Trevor Story was in Colorado, who was it before Trevor Story? Who was the shortstop? That was all the Colorado short. Oh my God, I'm blanking on his name.
The guy that went to Cal State Fullerton.
Troy Tulowitzki.
Yeah, Troy Tulowitzki, Cal State Fullerton, right.
In the early 2000s, the guy was like light years ahead of any other shortstop in fantasy, but he would only play 105 games a year because he got hurt all the time. But his production in those 105 games was as good as any other shortstop who played 150 games. And so it was still rosterable. Byron Buxton is the same way. Like, if he can give you 110 games, he's going to produce what 90% of the outfielders produce in 150. The problem is he's only giving you like 75 or 80 games right now. And so he needs to be healthy, but I'm still taking him on the off chance he is.
But those are the type of players I'm taking, Casey. I like the guys that have big ceilings. Another guy, you don't have to take him in probably the third or fourth or fifth round, is Cedric Mullins of Baltimore.
Well, that's your prediction for leading the league in steals.
45. I think he'll have like 45 to 50 stolen bases. He can hit 30 home runs.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy's the real deal this year. I think he's going to have a big year with Baltimore, especially with the players that they have on that team this year. They have a really good squad, and no one predicted them to do well last year. This is the year they're supposed to do well. This is the year they said, all their rookies are either rookies or they're second year guys. And Cedric Mullins is going to be huge this year. I mean, I'm trying to get as many Cedric Mullins as I can on my team because he's a guy that's going to have stolen bases, and he's going to have home runs, and he's going to have runs and RBIs, and he's going to be great. So he's somebody that I'm very high on this year.
Well, you and I have a draft in a few hours, Ross. Are you ready?
Yeah, it's just we'll see what happens. I think I'm going to go for the youth movement. I think I'm not going to. I don't think I'm going to draft like the veterans,
Scherzers and Verlanders and those.
Well, let me just tell the audience it's a keeper league. You keep top 6.
Yep.
And I inherited a team a few years ago, so I have Judge, I have Olsen,
Bogarts.
and I have Bogarts, and then I have Webb, Strider, and then and I also have Alek Manoah, and so my team's not that strong, but there's a lot of guys that are in the draft that I want to get.
Yeah, I mean, fantasy baseball drafts are my favorite. I like them more than football. Although that's not to say I don't love football also, but it's such a fun time. So, well, we will have to fill the audience in on how everything goes when we're back on Tuesday. Tuesday, 4:00 Eastern, 1:00 Pacific, right, Ross? Oh, we're losing Ross a little bit. I think he's back. And so, well, I think
can't hear you.
Okay, well,
hold on one second.
While Ross is figuring out the technicalities, MFSN is going to come to you all baseball season long on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tuesdays, we start at 4:00 Eastern, 1:00 Pacific. Thursdays, we start at 4:30 Eastern, 1:30 Pacific. We're going to bring you waiver wire targets every week. We're going to bring you new strategy tips. We're going to identify hot prospects to stash all season long. All season long, we're going to be bringing you updates on fantasy baseball, answering your questions, offering insights to help you dominate your fantasy league. Good luck.
We'll be there for you on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We'll tell you guys who to pick up, who to drop. And the madness starts next week.
I know. Good luck in your drafts this weekend. May you dominate the draft so that you have an easy coast through the season. But if not, we're always here to help. Have a good night, everybody.
Ross out.